JNR Ministry for kids. Today's story, we're going to be talking about what kind of heart do you want to have. In today's story, we are going to learn about someone who had a very hard heart. For 400 years, God's people have been slaves in Egypt. Being slaves meant that even though they had to work hard and do everything that the Egyptians said, the Egyptians never had to pay them any money. Even though they had been born in Egypt, God's people were not called Egyptians. They were called Israelites. The Israelites did not follow the gods of the Egyptians. They followed the one and only true God. In Egypt, in those times, a king was called a Pharaoh. The Pharaoh was a harsh leader. He had a very hard heart. He was mean to the Israelites. Pharaoh did not believe in God that we read about in our Bibles. Pharaoh and the rest of the Egyptians believed in the many gods of the Egyptians. They made statues. Some looked like frogs. Others were shaped like crocodiles, even geese. Pharaoh thought these gods could keep Egypt safe, but he was wrong. God had a plan for his people. He wanted them to live their own country where they could worship him. He did not want them to be slaves, so God chose Moses to lead them out of Egypt. God told Moses that he had a message for Pharaoh. The message was, "Pharaoh, let my people go." Moses did not feel like he would be a good leader, so God told him that Aaron, his brother, would be his helper. They would go to Pharaoh together. What a shock Pharaoh must have had when Moses told him to let the Israelites leave Egypt and worship their own God. Pharaoh said, "No, the Israelites cannot leave Egypt." He was so angry that's about it. He had the Israelites work even harder. He told them they had to make bricks, but he didn't give them enough straw to make them with. When this happened, the Israelites began to wonder if leaving Egypt was a good idea after all. Maybe they should just stay and keep being slaves. So Moses prayed to God. Was God sure about this? God's answer was yes. He told Moses not to worry. He would perform mighty wonders, and soon everyone would know that he was the more powerful than Pharaoh and any Egyptians and God. So Moses and Aaron went back to Pharaoh again. Pharaoh wanted to see a miracle. Moses and Aaron went back to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh wanted to see a miracle, so they did. And because they had prepared themselves, Aaron threw down his staff, the long stick that he carried, and it turned into a snake. Everyone was amazed. But then Pharaoh called his sorcerers and magicians in, and they were able to do the same thing using their tricks and secret arts. The sorcerers and magicians thought they were really clever until Aaron's snake swallowed their snake up. But even though God's power was evident, Pharaoh's heart remained hard, and he would not let the people go. So Plague 1 was the water to blood. The next Moses came to the Pharaoh. He repeated the same message, "Let my people go." He warned Pharaoh that he didn't agree, then God's power would make the Nile River turn into blood. And in fact, the water that had already been poured in jars would become blood. Pharaoh refused, so Aaron took his staff and stretched his hand over the Nile. All the water turned to blood. All around Egypt, the people would not have had water to drink. The blood also made the fish die, so the air smelled like dead fish. Pharaoh's magicians gave it a try and turned water to blood too. But that didn't really help matters to have even more blood. But even with all the dead fish, bad smells, and thirsty people, Pharaoh's heart remained hard. He would not let the people go. So plague 2 came on. Next, God sent a plague of frogs. Hundreds of frogs came out of the Nile River and hopped everywhere. Frogs got into people's beds and in their ovens and on their tables. Once again, Pharaoh called his magicians and they produced even more frogs. Well, the problem was not solved. They did not need more frogs. They needed fewer frogs. So Pharaoh asked Moses to make the plague stop. Even after Moses made the frogs go away, Pharaoh still refused to let the Israelites leave Egypt. So we're down to plague 3, gnats. Next, God told Moses to tell Aaron to use his staff to strike the dust of the ground. When he did this, the dust turned into gnats. Gnats got all over the people and the animals. The magicians tried to do the same, but they could not turn dust into gnats. When they saw how many gnats there were, they said to Pharaoh, Moses and Aaron are not doing tricks. This is really the power of God. But Pharaoh would not even listen to his own magicians. He would not let the people go. Once again, Moses came to Pharaoh with God's message and said, let my people go. When Pharaoh said no, hundreds of flies invaded Egypt. Flies were almost everywhere in Egypt. The only place there were not flies was in Goshen. Before, when Pharaoh said no, bad things happened to everyone. This time, a bad thing happened to the Egyptians, but nothing bad happened to the part of Egypt, the Egypt part called Goshen, where the Israelites lived. Pharaoh finally said he would let the people go out to the desert and worship God. So Moses prayed to God, and the flies left. But guess what? Pharaoh changed his mind and said, no, the people cannot leave. Moses visited Pharaoh again and warned him that he must let the Israelites go, or the next plague would cause Egyptians' animals to die. So horses, donkeys, camel, cattle, sheep, and goats belonging to the Egyptians died, but not one animal belonging to the Israelites died, since still Pharaoh's heart remained hard. And now, next, God told Moses and Aaron to toss soot from a furnace into the air in front of Pharaoh. This would spread through Egypt, causing the Egyptian people and their animals to break out in big sores called boils. People could not even stand up because of the sores on the soles of their feet. Still, people, Pharaoh did not relent. And now God had already sent 6 plagues, but Pharaoh's heart was still hard. He refused to change his mind, but God would never give up. He would make sure Pharaoh knew how powerful he was and how much he loved his people. Moses and Aaron once again gave God's message to Pharaoh. When Pharaoh said no this time, God told Moses to stretch his hand toward the sky to bring on the worst hailstorm that had ever hit the Egyptians of nation. Some of the Egyptians listened, and some did, and brought their families, servants, and animals into shelter. Others did not listen, and hail was like balls of ice that rained down hard from the sky. Many people and animals died when the hail hit them, and most of the food crops were destroyed by the hail, and only Goshen remained untouched. When Pharaoh saw this, he confessed he had sinned and that he had been wrong not to let the people go. But guess what? Once again, as soon as Moses stopped the hail, Pharaoh changed his mind. He would not let the people go. Now Moses and Aaron warned Pharaoh that a swarm of locust insects, like flying grasshoppers, worse than anyone in Egypt have ever seen, would eat them, or not eat them, but eat anything, actually, that was left of the crops and trees in Egypt following the hailstorm. Pharaoh's officials begged him not to let the Israelites go, but Pharaoh refused. Pharaoh said, maybe I'll just let the men go, but keep all the women and children in Egypt. This would not do. When Moses stretched out his hand, God caused the east wind to bring in an invasion of locusts. They destroyed everything that was still growing. Once again, Pharaoh said he was sorry, but changed his mind as soon as Moses prayed and the locusts left. Pharaoh really did have a hard heart. Now God caused darkness to fall over the Egypt. For 3 days there was no light in Egypt. It felt like nighttime all over. There was only one part of Egypt that had light. Guess what? It was Goshen. Now, Pharaoh tried to trick Moses again and say that the Israelites could leave but had to leave their animals behind. When Moses knew how hard Pharaoh's heart was, he told Pharaoh that God wanted all of these people, men, women, old people, children, and babies, and even all their animals to leave Egypt together. Pharaoh became extremely angry and had Moses and Aaron thrown out of the palace. Pharaoh told Moses that he never wanted him to come to the palace again and asked that the people go. While Pharaoh would get his wish, Moses would never come and ask again. The next time Pharaoh will see Moses, it will be Pharaoh begging Moses. The very last plague was just about to happen. Every plague had caused pain and suffering, but the 10th and last plague was the most fascinating of all. Egyptians would find out that without God's protection, even their own children would not be safe from death. Pharaoh had a hard one toward God. He thought he was the most powerful, but he was not. Pharaoh and the magicians and sorcerers and the Egyptian people thought that their gods would protect them, but they did not. Through the 10 plagues, God showed that he was the most powerful and only he could protect and save the people. God loved his people, and then God loves us now. What kind of heart do you want to have, huh? A hard heart like Pharaoh, or a soft heart that loves and obeys God? Now, children, get your parents so you can have the go ahead to do an experiment today. We're going to take a rock and a sponge, and we're going to do a little experiment today. You will need a marker, and this will draw out the heart you need on each item of the rock and the sponge. This will show if the heart should be softened or hardened. You use a bowl full of water for each item. Now take the sponge and dip it in the bowl of water and see if the sponge soaks it up. Now take a rock and try to pour water on the rock into the bowl. Does the water absorb? From this experiment, we will show you that the sponge absorbs the water, just like God absorbs your heart. But the rock doesn't absorb water, so our heart shouldn't be as hard as the Pharaoh's was. We should let God into our hearts, just like the sponge let the water in. And remember, next week we will be on another story, another adventure.